Greetings, Mariculture Minuteers. You're listening to Mariculture Minute, a podcast about ocean farming in Alaska. We cover seaweed, shellfish, and salmon. And today, we'll hear how all this mixes with Alaska's race for governor. I'm Jeremiah Murphy, talking to you from the largest city in the United States, Sitka, Alaska. That's largest city by square mile. So, polish that press pass, pop on your critical thinking cap, and prepare to lurk in the shadows as those in power crank out backroom deals. Well, I'm getting a little carried away with that last one, but we'll have fun. Today, we're going to kelp the vote. But first, I apologize. It's been a few weeks since the last episode. The kiddos had spring break. I went to the Mariculture conference in Anchorage. I flew there on a plane and annoyed the person sitting next to me when I was using the reading light to look at my phone. I'll talk about the conference in a future episode. But on top of all that, there's been a few snow days here in Sitka. It usually rains here. It's a coastal rainforest, but we got snow instead. It looks beautiful, but the school closed. The roads were perilous. But now, the sun's out. I can hear the drip, drip, drip as the melting snow makes its way down the gutter. Speaking of changes, today, we're going to hear from 3 candidates for Alaska governor. Edna DeVries, Shelley Hughes, and Jonathan Kreiss-Tomkins. I emailed them 4 questions about mariculture, and I will read the responses in the order that I received their emails. I know what you're thinking. You get emails from politicians all the time. Why is Mariculture Minute giving you more? Because Alaska's current governor is not running again, and the race is wide open. And Mariculture Minute is committed to finding out what these candidates think of kelp. Can the state help ocean farmers in any way by easing the permitting process or supporting farmers as the industry finds a solid market? I want to find out what the candidates think of shellfish farming. What can the state do to protect farmers and consumers from paralytic shellfish toxins, which is something the state tests commercial shellfish for, but maybe there's some politicians with ideas that could make the process easier for farmers or more accessible for people digging up clams on their own. In previous episodes, we've heard from 6 other candidates. So as of this episode, we have the responses from 9 out of the 16 people currently running for governor of Alaska. That's right, 16. It's a lot. But in the primary in August, that number will be reduced to 4 candidates. And that's the 4 who get the most votes on the primary ballot. On the primary ballot, you, the Alaskan voter, will pick 4 candidates. And those 4 then go to the November ballot. And on that ballot, we can rank the candidates 1, 2, 3, or 4 in our ranked choice voting process, which is cool, but I won't explain it because I see from my market research that this is the point in most episodes that people stop listening. It's important voters know about all the candidates in Alaska. Editorial note, Mariculture Minute does not endorse any candidate. So, here we go! Edna DeVries is running for governor of Alaska as a Republican. A little background. DeVries has held a few offices here in Alaska. She is currently the mayor of Matanuska, Susitna Borough, commonly called Mat-Su. It's an area north of Anchorage. Mat-Su's most notable towns are Palmer and Wasilla. Mat-Su has the Matanuska and Susitna rivers that flow into Cook Inlet. According to Wikipedia, Mat-Su is one of Alaska's few agricultural areas. We're talking terrestrial farms, food grown on land. I have heard of a project to test kelp as a fertilizer in Palmer. So, there is some kelp going on there. Palmer is also known as the home of the Alaska State Fair. Weird Al played there this fall. Besides being mayor of Mat-Su, DeVries has been mayor of Palmer, Alaska. She has also served in the Alaska State Senate and the Palmer City Council. I'll be reading Mayor DeVries' responses, but I want to include a short clip of her voice.
Hi, I'm Edna DeVries, Mayor of the Mat-Su Borough.
So here we go. I asked Mayor DeVries question 1. As governor, would you do anything to promote kelp production in Alaska? Answer, yes. Alaska has enormous potential in kelp and shellfish mariculture, and the state can play a constructive role without getting in the way. Kelp farming creates jobs in coastal communities, supports working waterfronts. It could be a smart, sustainable growth sector for Alaska. Question 2. Would you support a statewide program to monitor coastal waters for paralytic shellfish poisoning blooms? Answer. Yes. PSP is a real threat to public health, subsistence harvesters, and small mariculture businesses. A statewide monitoring program built on partnerships with tribes, universities, and local communities would give Alaskans reliable, timely information. This is a basic public safety function, and it protects both lives and livelihoods. Question 3. What's your favorite shellfish or seaweed dish? Answer. Enjoyed living across the road from the beach so we could dig for clams for dinner and clam chowder. Clam chowder set an often event after church, which we continue on even when we moved to Palmer. Question 4. Do you have any other thoughts on Alaskan mariculture? Answer. Alaska can assist in leading the nation in sustainable kelp and shellfish production if we keep the process predictable, science-based, and locally driven. With the right support, mariculture can become a meaningful part of Alaska's diversified economy. So, Mayor DeVries supports kelp and shellfish farming. She sees it as something that can promote jobs and the economies of coastal towns. She thinks it's important to protect Alaskans from paralytic shellfish toxins, both for public health and the financial health of shellfish farms. And she enjoys a good homemade clam chowder. So overall, general positive responses. Next, we'll hear from gubernatorial candidate Shelley Hughes, a Republican candidate for Alaska governor. Shelley Hughes lives in Palmer, Alaska. We talked about that town a little bit before. They have some terrestrial agriculture there. Hughes served in the Alaska Senate from 2016 to 2025 and was the Senate Majority Leader from 2021 until she resigned in 2025. She has also served in the Alaska House of Representatives. Here is a brief clip of what State Senator Hughes sounds like from her YouTube channel.
Hello, friends.
Former State Senator Shelley Hughes writes, I just retrieved your email before I cleaned out my junk folder. Sorry I didn't see it when it first arrived, because I would have loved to have participated. I was the huge ag and food security champion in the legislature for years. I resigned before Thanksgiving. I'll answer the questions just in case there's another upcoming opportunity. So, just to let you know what's going on there, I had emailed all the candidates a few months ago, and I gave them like some deadline that was like in October, November. It's now March. But I only received responses from a few candidates, so I've just been keeping the emails going, and that's what Senator Shelley Hughes is talking about there. But I included that bit just to show Senator Hughes talks about her being the huge ag and food security champion in the legislature, and it also puts her answers maybe in a little context for what it's worth. So, question 1. As governor, would you do anything to promote kelp production in Alaska? Answer, yes. The yes is in caps. Right along with our food agriculture industry, we need to grow our mariculture industry, including kelp. It would get attention, technical assistance, marketing support, and more in my Department of Agriculture. We take care of removing any regulatory barriers hampering industry. Question 2. Would you support a statewide program to monitor coastal waters for paralytic shellfish poisoning blooms? Answer. I need to learn more about this and what it would involve, but sounds like it would be important to do. Question 3. What's your favorite shellfish or seaweed dish? Answer. Nothing beats king crab, or actually any kind of crab, in lemon butter. Shrimp comes in a close second. Question 4. Do you have any other thoughts on Alaskan mariculture? Answer. The fact that we have more coast than the rest of the U.S. combined tells me we have a great opportunity awaiting us along our shore. So, to summarize and characterize Hughes' responses, they're all generally positive. She admits she needs to research paralytic shellfish toxins and how to monitor them, but I want to point your attention to one small detail in Hughes' responses. She writes that mariculture would get all sorts of support from her Department of Agriculture. The current governor, Mike Dunleavy, has tried to create an Alaska Department of Agriculture. He tried with an executive order. I think the legislature blocked that. But then the legislature did two pieces of legislation. They proposed two pieces of legislation last year, and I think they might actually I think they're going to be voted on this year. So this is all to say we don't have a Department of Agriculture right now. We have a Division of Agriculture, which is part of the Department of Natural Resources, DNR. I think all these government agencies get confusing, but why am I pointing this out? Why do you care? Well, first of all, it just kind of shows you how politics work in Alaska. But also, if Alaska creates a Department of Agriculture, it would be part of the governor's cabinet, and perhaps the governor could be more directly involved in growing food here in Alaska, including kelp and oysters. Could an Alaska Department of Agriculture help mariculture? Could it help kelp farmers in Prince of Wales or oyster farmers off of Homer? Shelley Hughes thinks so. Senator Hughes declared king crab as her favorite shellfish, and I have to admit, I learned something with this response. My head has been so submersed in oyster farms, clams, and mussels. I thought I was asking which one of those is her favorite. But shellfish covers both mollusks, like our bivalve friends, and crustaceans, like Shelley Hughes' favorite king crab. Well, I learned something from the dictionary today. I'll include more details on what exactly is shellfish in the show notes. Maybe I should call them shell notes. I think I need to make this podcast a little more cutesy. Speaking of the shell notes, I'll add some links to back up another fact that Hughes brings up. Alaska's coastline is bigger than the rest of the U.S. combined, which to me is an important fact when you're thinking about Alaska's mariculture potential. I mean, there's a lot of coastline in Alaska that's impractical for ocean farming. There's some frozen spots and lots of stuff that's so remote it might be cost prohibitive to farm there. But even considering those areas, there's still a lot of good spots for farming kelp and bivalves in Alaska. Up next, we'll hear from Jonathan Kreiss-Tomkins, a Democrat candidate for governor. Kreiss-Tomkins, or JKT as he's also known, served as a representative in the Alaska State House from 2013 to 2023, where he represented a bunch of southeast Alaska communities from Hoonah, Kake, Klawak, Craig, Angoon, Petersburg, and where I am right now, Sitka. In fact, JKT is originally from Sitka. And before I read his responses, here's a brief clip of what he sounds like from his Instagram.
When you launched the campaign in Juneau, we had a...
So here we go. Question 1. As governor, would you do anything to promote kelp production in Alaska? Answer, yes. On the supply side, permitting is still a slow, terribly cumbersome process. I plan to direct DNR and ADFG, so that's Department of Natural Resources and Alaska Department of Fish and Game, to streamline permitting and give them support so they can move quickly and allow our Alaska farmers to spend more time growing kelp and less time doing paperwork. On the demand side, we need to further expand our markets in order to grow the kelp industry. Alaska has a lot of incredible and entrepreneurial experts, such as who I would want to empower to move the industry forward. Question 2. Would you support a statewide program to monitor coastal waters for paralytic shellfish poisoning blooms? Answer, yes. The paralytic and diuretic shellfish toxin and the paralytic shellfish poisoning that comes from toxin have both unfortunately become common in Alaska. As a result, testing is more important. As a legislator, I supported state funding to test for PSP, and I would make sure the state, working with tribes, can be a partner for the industry. We are already fortunate that DEC, that's the Department of Environmental Conservation, received funding for new toxin testing equipment. I want to make sure this state-of-the-art equipment is fully used so that it can benefit shellfish farmers and Alaskans. And there's a little background info with a link that JKT provided, which I'll explain in a little bit. Question 3. What's your favorite shellfish or seaweed dish? Answer. I love Barnacle's bullwhip hot sauce on freshly shucked Alaska oysters. Kelp meets shellfish, the perfect marriage. Question 4. Do you have any other thoughts on Alaskan mariculture? Answer. The mariculture grant funding that Alaska received has accelerated the industry, and I want to make sure we redouble the momentum. Much of the recent conversation has been focused on kelp farming, but it's worth noting that Alaska had and has many successful shellfish farms that predate kelp cultivation. In fact, my dad did some experimental mariculture research with oyster spat in the 1990s when I was growing up in Sitka. The state should take an all-of-the-above approach supporting these shellfish farmers as well as kelp farmers and processors. So, to summarize JKT's responses. They're positive responses to mariculture with some specific details. You can tell there's some knowledge here about mariculture and what goes on with it. I even learned a couple things. Kreiss-Tomkins notes the ocean farming application process, saying he wants kelp farmers to have more time growing kelp and less time doing paperwork. To grow the kelp market, Kreiss-Tomkins proposes to empower entrepreneurs. To put the above comment about the application process in context, the current application process to lease and permit an aquatic farm in Alaska takes about 8 months. And the applications go through the Alaska Department of Natural Resources, DNR, the Alaska Department of Fish and Game, ADFG, and the Alaska Department of Environmental Conservation, the DEC. And sometimes even the Army Corps of Engineers. While the application process its aim is to make sure the ocean is farmed in the best way possible, any politician who says they'll streamline the application process probably has every ocean farmer's ear. I'll include a link to the application flowchart in the shell notes. Someone really needs to make a song, though, that illustrates the application process, because nobody leaves that application without singing the blues. In response to monitoring paralytic shellfish toxins, JKT supports a statewide program and cites his past support. He also talks about the Department of Environmental Conservation's newly purchased toxin testing equipment and includes a link which I'll pass on to you in the shell notes. Briefly, though, the article talks about the DEC's new equipment and how it can test for paralytic shellfish toxins, but the DEC will focus the testing on diuretic shellfish toxin. This is another ocean toxin that can get in shellfish, and, well, the name is self-explanatory. It gives you a bad case of the runs. So, overall, JKT supports kelp and shellfish farming in Alaska. Well, here we are, at the end of the episode, and I learned a lot about these 3 candidates. Who all say yes to promoting kelp production in Alaska and see mariculture as something that benefits the state. The differences of DeVries, Hughes, and Kreiss-Tomkins seem to come from perhaps their backgrounds. Hughes sees the Alaska Department of Agriculture playing a key role. Kreiss-Tomkins notes the power of entrepreneurs. And DeVries has a point of view that all candidates basically share. The state should help ocean farmers without getting in the way. Kreiss-Tomkins gets specific with talking about the permitting process and drops a few more specifics, such as the need for processing facilities and even the brand name of his favorite kelp hot sauce, the Barnacle Bullwhip kelp hot sauce, which, to be honest, is popular among other kelp folks I've met. I've heard it praised a lot. DeVries and Hughes' responses are a little more brief, but perhaps they will offer more ocean farming specifics in the future. Speaking of the future, I'm trying to organize all these responses. Maybe I'll make some kind of scorecard. It won't rank the candidates, but summarize the responses next to each other so you can compare them a little better. Wow. We covered a lot in this episode. We heard from 3 people who could possibly be the next governor of Alaska. We learned some vocabulary words, shellfish, well, which I just found out includes crustaceans and mollusks, crabs and clams. We learned about diuretic shellfish toxin as well as paralytic shellfish toxin, which we've mentioned a bit in other episodes. But today we also learned that Alaska's coastline is bigger than the other states combined. Take that, Florida. Boom! I'll include links to all these things. And I briefly mentioned the work of Aaron Oliver, a scientist researching kelp as a fertilizer in Palmer, Alaska. I got to hear her speak in the Mariculture conference in Anchorage that I went to. Her research sounds interesting. I'll include a link in the show notes. And you can find all those shell notes at kelpshow.com. Speaking of which, you can find Mariculture Minute, this podcast, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, which is a weird place for podcasts. Honestly, they take the podcast feed and then grab a picture to make a video, which is something I could do better if I had more time, but people are listening there, so I'm just going to go with it. I'm also on Instagram at Kelp Show. I have 111 followers so far. Not bad. You can see pictures of me skiing. Special thanks to the campaigns of Edna DeVries, Shelley Hughes, and Jonathan Kreiss-Tomkins, and special thanks to W for providing the music today. I'm Jeremiah Murphy, and this has been Mariculture Minute.